Binge the full week of The Ray Taylor Show ad-free over at inspireddisorder.com/plus.
This is The Ray Taylor Show.
Creepshow from 1982. This one is written by Stephen King, directed by George A. Romero. Last week, I did a top 5 of my favorite George A. Romero zombie movies. Not this week, but the following week, I will be doing a top 5 of all of the other movies that were directed by George A. Romero. This may or may not make that list. We will see, find out next week. But I do want to talk about classic horror films. Since it is the month of October and I want to dedicate my movie reviews to horror films, this is a movie that I remember watching as a kid, remember watching specifically one of the stories that are featured in this movie at a friend's house, and didn't remember it until I rewatched this. I thought it was my first time viewing Creepshow, but it wasn't. I'm also doing a bit of a crossover in this episode because this is an anthology film. There are 5 separate stories that are featured in Creepshow from 1982. Obviously, there's an overarching kind of a narrative to stitch them all together. But I will be talking about this, but I will also be ranking the stories that are featured in Creepshow from worst to first. So this is a bit of a crossover, not only just a movie review, but also a top 5, which generally my episodes for top 5 are on Sundays, where I rank my 5 favorite films within a subgenre by director or actor. However, this is a special little crossover event in this episode. So let's get into it, shall we? Creepshow, obviously, this is an anthology series, an anthology film that is inspired by the Creepshow comic books, which were a horror comic book. The overarching story, the connective tissue of this movie is about a kid who has a Creepshow comic that his dad is not a fan of and not happy with, and takes the Creepshow comic away and throws it away, and while in the garbage can, the stories come to life, or at least as the audience, we are transported into the stories that are featured in the Creepshow comic, which I never had a Creepshow comic, but it reminds me similarly of the Mad magazine, which I did have growing up, which was kind of, a comic of a lot of different comedy type stories, usually a lot of spoofs on whatever the popular movie was of the time. But anyway, so the kid has the comic book, the dad comes in. Obviously, this is a time where child abuse was kind of a standard parental strategy of the time, and the dad even says, "That's why God made fathers." To apparently abuse the children, to be rough with them, to teach them a lesson, as it were. But anyway, let's get into the stories. I'm not going to be talking about these in order, obviously, because I'm ranking them from my least favorite story to my favorite story. But starting off with number 5, my least favorite story of Creepshow 82 is actually the first story. Which is called Father's Day, which is, kind of poignant, considering the way we're introduced to these stories is by a father being somewhat abusive to his kid. Father's Day, starring Ed Harris, which Ed Harris appears in, I believe, at least one other Romero film. The one about night riders, about the motorcycle riders that are also like into it's like medieval times mixed with Hell's Angels. An interesting film starring Ed Harris. But this one, Ed Harris is with his wife, I guess, at a family reunion of sorts. He's with his wife's family, who's very weird. It's very creepy family, which is, just a situation that is tough to deal with in reality. It's tough if you're going out with somebody and you go to spend time, whether it's the holidays. In this case, it's Father's Day, and the father of the family, the dad of the family, was actually killed by one of the daughters. And so it's, kind of starts in with the aspect of horror in that way, where he finds out what actually happened. And this daughter shows up drunk, obviously, always on time. And she goes to the gravestone where the father's buried and kind of tells him off. And as she does, the father comes out from under the earth, as zombies tend to do in Romero films. I guess, actually, out of all of the zombie films that Romero directed, I don't believe there were any actual shots of zombies coming out of the grave. This might be one of the only times you actually see a zombie dig themselves out from the grave site. And so basically, all these stories are short, and it's basically the dad slowly kills the daughter. Ed Harris gets to take a little break from the crazy family that he's surrounded by, goes outside to get a smoke, and he stumbles upon a Jim Beam bottle of whiskey on the ground that the daughter had left, before she was killed. And he ends up falling into the grave, and the gravestone falls on him, and the dad is just going through killing people, wanting his cake. And the end is obviously him actually getting his cake. And, it's kind of funny. It actually, some of these shots in this actually reminded me of the recent film by Rob Zombie, The Munsters. The aesthetic of Creepshow is very much a similar aesthetic to Rob Zombie. So I would imagine Rob Zombie took that kind of design aesthetic where you're seeing like shots of people as they're screaming with kind of a lit background, kind of an animated light background of like lightning bolts and things. Very similar both ways of those two films. So something that was surprising while watching this, that it seems that Rob Zombie took some design inspiration from Creepshow, which may have been a kind of a similar aesthetic for other horror films, kind of like comedy horror films of the 80s, which this movie, some of these have definitely comedic aspects to them. But anyway, number 5 is Father's Day. It was okay. Not very creepy. The family is a little creepy. The story is kind of interesting, whatever. He's all about getting cake, which is like, whatever. It's the first story, and it's my least favorite. But let's move on to my 4th favorite story in Creepshow from 1982, The Lonesome Death of Jordy Verrill, which I believe is actually the second story as well in this thing. And this is a story that starts with a meteor falling to Earth in like a rural part of somewhere, and Jordy is he reminds me a lot of Simple Jack, which was a character played by one of the characters in Tropic Thunder, the guy with the bowl cut that's kind of, gone full R-word. Let's put it that way. Kind of a cross between Simple Jack and a cross between Joe Dirt. Obviously, both of these characters came way after this movie, so it seems as if those two characters may have been in some way inspired by Jordy Verrill. Very like hillbilly, kind of stupid, maybe a little special, maybe some learning disabilities. And of course, Joe Dirt, there is the part of the Joe Dirt movie where he thinks an asteroid falls to Earth, but it's actually just a frozen chunk of shit from an airplane. But this is an asteroid, lands in Jordy Verrill's like yard area outside of his trailer, and he goes to check it out, and he has dreams of selling this asteroid to the school, he goes to touch it, and it burns his fingers, so he pours water over the meteor, which cracks it open because of the temperature shift. And inside the meteor is this like glowing liquid that Geordi obviously pours it out, puts it in his bucket, takes it inside because he's excited to go take it to the school and get rich off of this meteor that he found. And as he's watching his wrestling, very stereotypical hillbilly entertainment, watching his wrestling, you see him sucking on his fingers, his burnt fingers, and you see the burn starting to grow and blister up. And outside, you start seeing like alien plants starting to sprout up, which is cool. I actually like how the progression of this story, how fast these alien plants grow. I like the look of the alien plants. They eventually start growing on Geordi Verrill himself. Starts, growing. These alien plants are like growing off of him, growing, in his hand, almost looking like a werewolf in some ways. And it ends with him basically covered in this alien plant life, and he ends up grabbing a shotgun and ending it all. Kind of funny. The character itself, very goofy. Very goofy. Very... it's funny. It's funny. Maybe doesn't hold up as much today. The cross-eyed, dim-witted, hillbilly, redneck kind of a guy. But anyway, it's number 4. I found it more entertaining. I like the art department's take on alien plant life growing exponentially in his like, not only outside, but also inside of his trailer, all over his body. It's fun. It's a fun one, but only coming in at number 4. Let's take a little break from the show to promote gift certificates. If you want to purchase artwork for somebody, you have an art lover in your life, and you think they would like my art, but you don't know what painting to get them. I have over 2,000 original pieces of art for sale in my store, along with shirts and prints and other things. So I can understand that being a bit daunting if you're trying to buy something for somebody else. Give them the gift certificate, and then they can go to my website, inspireddisorder.com, and they can buy whatever paintings they want. They can buy whatever prints they want. They can buy t-shirts. They can buy hats. They can buy all the different merch, gift certificates, which are available currently at inspireddisorder.com. And now let's get back to the show. Moving on to my third favorite story in Creepshow 1982. This one a little bit more involved. I think this may be the second to the last story, but coming in at number 3 is The Crate. This is one, definitely the more complex of the stories so far. There's these professors having a party, and one of the professors hates his wife. She's very mean to him, and he has visions. He daydreams about killing her, about different ways of killing her, whether it's shooting her or choking her. You see his daydreams, his fantasies of that play out. And she's obviously insults, like everything out of her mouth is an insult to him. Just the most toxic of relationships. Clearly two people that have no business being together, but for whatever reason, especially I guess back in the 80s, it's amazing why people would stay together. They didn't have kids. They hate each other clearly, and he's constantly fantasizing. Meanwhile, another professor gets a call, has to go into the school. One of the janitors found this old crate underneath one of the stairs of the university, and it's a crate that was labeled from the 1800s, and he's like, we got to see what's in there. It's really heavy. When they pick it up to put it on top of a counter, the janitors thought he felt something move, and as they pry it open, they see that there's a monster inside. This kind of a primate looking type of a monster. And the monster kills the janitor. The professor is freaked out, calls his friend who has the toxic marriage, calls him to ask him for help because the janitor's gone and he's freaked out. He goes to his house, and he ends up, telling him all about it. They have some drinks. The guy in the toxic relationship drugs him because he has an idea. He's going to use this monster in order to, quote unquote, take care of his wife. He wants to use this situation in order to set his wife up. And he goes and he cleans things up. He invites her over, makes up this story that, oh, my professor friend has had this run-in with a student that his wife isn't happy, and you need to come down to kind of talk. She's hiding. She's messed up. She got messed up. Like, creating this whole story of abuse, of infidelity, and his wife, who's drunk, who clearly out cheating on him or whatever, comes to do it. And it's like this elaborate thing where they're using this monster in order to kill his wife, and then it also becomes them kind of forming a pact not to tell anybody. They ditch the monster in the ocean, which of course it breaks out eventually. But creepy, involved story, like an interesting complexity to the story. And just, it's, it's a bros versus hoes story for sure. But, an interesting story, an interesting kind of a take on a monster story, like using the monster as a way to eliminate your wife, to get rid of your wife, and to cover up. It's like it's kind of like, it's almost like a murder mystery in some ways, but told through a horror monster lens. So coming in at number 3 is The Crate. Moving on to my second favorite short story in Creepshow from 1982. This is one, probably the creepiest. One that made me, it's not my favorite, it's my second favorite, but it is the one that made me actively creep me out. It is one that, is something that, let's say, gets under my skin. Pardon the pun. So coming in at number 2, my second favorite story from Creepshow is They're Creeping Up on You. This is a sci-fi, like, kind of, it's clearly like the 80s sci-fi. Like, there's still, CRT monitors, there's dot matrix printers, but it is clearly supposed to be some kind of like futuristic apartment that is all in white, like all clean, and this guy that lives there is this asshole who's like wealthy and runs businesses, but is also a germaphobe. In every aspect, like everything looks sterile in his apartment, all in white, everything clean. He has like this vacuum system where he can dispense his tissues that he uses to clean things off. And he's being bombarded by cockroaches. And it is, basically a horror story where you're happy that the character, pretty much the only character, gets his comeuppance. Like, you're happy that the bugs take over, but it is creepy how it happens. And it's something that if you've ever had cockroaches in your house or just an infestation of bugs in general, it's something that you can kind of relate to. And it's something that as this guy is, we learn this character is more and more toxic, that more and more insects kind of show themselves. The insect paranoia of it all is very terrifying. And, something that I think is pretty relatable, dealing with bugs. Also the fact, like, not only bugs crawling on you, crawling around you, in your food, but also the idea of like bugs crawling under your skin, bugs kind of erupting out of your body. Terrifying. All of that stuff terrifying. And I kind of love it. I kind of love the story. It is a creepy story, and it's also a happy ending in some ways, you know, where the true pest is eliminated by the end. But yeah, I kind of love it, and it's definitely the one that creeped me. It's the one that gave me tingles and shivers out of all of them, but it is only coming in at number 2, my second favorite. They're creeping up on you. Let's take a little break from the show to promote. If you sign up for Inspired Disorder Plus for 1 year specifically, you get a free painting. So a year subscription of Inspired Disorder Plus is $50. The painting, the majority of them are $100. So it's a $150 value signing up for 1 year of Inspired Disorder Plus. So not only do you get a free painting, but you also are subscribed to Plus for a year, which means that you can binge this show, The Ray Taylor Show, ad-free, the full week, ad-free, available on Monday. You also get discounts that are members-only pricing type of deals. All of the podcasts that I've produced in the past, close to 20 different podcasts I've produced, hundreds of episodes. There's also my personal blog. You can ask me anything if you want to start podcasting or get into art. All of that stuff available in addition to a free painting when you sign up to 1 year subscription of Inspired Disorder Plus.
Head on over to inspireddisorder.com/plus and become an Inspired Disorder Plus member today. And now let's get back to the show.
Moving on to my favorite story of Creepshow. If you're familiar with Creepshow from 1982, obviously you know which one is left. It is coming in at number 1, Something to Tide You Over. This is the one that I remembered from my childhood. This is the one where I was like, oh, this is where I saw this. Because it's something I've always remembered. I've always had these memories of this story where this guy gets buried at the beach up to his head while the tide's out, and then the tide comes flowing in. This one has Ted Danson, which is amazing, from Cheers. It also has Leslie Nielsen from the Naked Gun franchise. It's got a serious horror take on Leslie Nielsen. My experience watching Leslie Nielsen films has all been through comedy for the most part. But in this one, he is the bad guy. He is the killer in this instance, where he kidnaps Ted Danson. Well, he kidnapped Ted Danson's girlfriend or wife, significant other, and that's how he kidnaps Ted Danson in order to get her back. And he ends up burying Ted Danson on the beach up to his head, brings a monitor over, an old TV monitor with like running cable. You know, before everything was wireless and battery operated, they had to like run cabling onto the beach, where he had a camera on Ted Danson, but then he had a monitor that showed his girlfriend that was buried a different part of the beach, and the tide was already coming up. She's choking on the water, and Leslie Nielsen's like, how long can you hold your breath? And the shot of Ted Danson as the tide comes in and covers his head, where it's like underwater and you see the seaweed floating around him, is an image that I've had burned into my brain my entire life. And I'm glad that I finally found out where that came from. And it's kind of, you know, you get to see a little bit more of Leslie Nielsen's house. You get to see that he has like a collection of these VHS tapes. He's also got cameras everywhere. He's obsessed with documenting things and surveilling things. And he's clearly done this to a lot of people. He owns property on the beach. And you don't really know his motive for doing that to these people other than collecting the VHS tapes of them. Like, he's gotten so bored with reality that he's moved into creating his own kind of entertainment, watching these people drown on the beach. And it's great because you get to see a new kind of a zombie, the water zombie, where Ted Danson and his significant other come back to get revenge on Leslie Nielsen's character, which I enjoyed that as well. It's another story where the ultimate bad guy, right, the human being who is the actual monster, gets taken out by the thing that's supposed to be scary, right? In the second, they're creeping up on you. It's the cockroaches overtaking this asshole. And in this one, in Something to Tide You Over, it is the zombified victims coming back to get revenge on Leslie Nielsen, and he ends up being buried on the beach at the end of it. So I enjoyed that one the most. It was just fun. Also, the fact that it's a memory that I've had in my head for so long, and knowing where it finally came from is interesting. And also realizing that it's Ted Danson and Leslie Nielsen. As a kid, I probably didn't know who either of them were. And overall, it was a fun movie. The end of Creepshow, where it's the next morning, the trash guys are coming to pick up the trash, and they see one of the trash guys sees the comic on the ground and picks it up, and he's reading through it. It's like, oh, my kid loves these. And another small detail of this is that between each story, you would see the illustration of the first and last shot of each story, and you see the kind of the advertisements that would show up. You would see the question and answer where people could write into the publishers of Creepshow, like talking about how much they love it and getting the response from the editors. And then also the advertisements, and the trash guy's looking through, and he's like, oh, you want to get a voodoo doll? You want to get buff? And the awesome aspect of this is that the kid ordered the voodoo doll because the dad the next morning is like complaining about his neck hurting. And then it cuts to the kid up in his room putting pins in this voodoo doll. And the voodoo doll represents the dad. So the kid's getting revenge on the asshole dad, the abusive father that God sent to Earth to keep kids in line. Which is kind of, just... It's an aspect of horror movies, but specifically this one that's like clearly this made for kids. And at the end is like it shows a kid having power over the controlling adults. That voodoo is real, that like the magical aspects of some horror are real, and you can get revenge. You can use those things to get revenge over the people that treat you horribly in your life. But yeah, Creepshow from 1982 is great. Apparently, I think there was a sequel, maybe two, movie forms. But apparently there's also a TV show, which is pretty great as well. So I'm sure it's, an anthology series. Maybe I'll check that out one of these times and do a top 5 of a season of Creepshow if I have access to them anywhere. I'm not sure where it's available, but while making this, putting it together, it was fun. And, kind of a fun, they're really just kind of fun stories, horror stories. Not too dark. The definitely the darkest one, I would say, is The Crate. It's the one that's kind of feels, in some ways, the most grounded. The toxic relationships, the kind of murder cover-up type of a thing. Anyway, I enjoyed it. It was fun. We'll see if it makes my George Romero list, non-zombie list, top 5 next week. But it was fun movie to check out. It was something that wasn't available. I was able to find a place to stream it, but it's not really available on all the major streamers. But who knows? Maybe it's on Shudder or something like that. I don't have Shudder. But it's a fun one, and if you haven't watched it recently, it's a fun one to check out, especially if you did like Creepshow from 1982. There's a chance you might like Rob Zombie's The Munsters, because it does have... There are like aesthetic similarities and tonally kind of, they both feel like they're made for kids. They both have a similar aesthetic where it's like horror theme, but kind of lighthearted in a lot of ways. So if you did like Creepshow from 1982, I would recommend Rob Zombie's The Munsters on Netflix. But either way, check out Creepshow. It was fun.
New episodes of The Ray Taylor Show come out every single day. Subscribe on YouTube and everywhere our podcasts are found. Binge the full week over at inspireddisorder.com/plus. Buy Ray Taylor Show merch over at inspireddisorder.com. And follow the show on Instagram at Ray Taylor Show. Have a wonderful day, everybody. Peace out!
Today is the day where you wake up and you realize that everything that you've been dreaming about, everything that you've been wanting, every goal and wish and hope that you've ever had can become real. Dreams can come true. What you manifest in your mind, you can bring to reality.